She was famous for the roles that she played in tragedies. And then the writer says, now this was a real tragedy. So she was an actress who played the role of characters in tragedies, but she lived a tragedy herself. We call that irony in stories. Irony. Irony is when the story is, it means something to us because we didn't really expect it to turn out that way. You know, when something is called an irony in a story, it means that the story ended differently than what we thought it would be. In one hand, it shouldn't have ended that way, but on the other hand, how else could it end? You know, so here you have an actress who should be very, very pleased with herself. She should be very happy. She was famous. And she was made famous by acting roles in tragedies. But she ended up living a tragic life herself. That's irony. That's irony. Most tragic stories have irony in them. When you see movies or read books, we are made to feel close to these people, to feel compassion for these people because of irony, the way things turned out. So let's start with Nat, where it says Smita is shaking her head sadly.
Smita is shaking her head sadly. How terrible, she says. I've seen Muda's Mahal. Are we going to talk about Nirmala Kumari? I say. Or shall I tell you about the quiz show? Smita play on the DVD player. Okay, Mr. Thomas, said Ben Kumar. Here is the present for 10,000 rupees. English year did Nirmala Kumar, the tragedy queen, win the National Award for the Best Actress. Was it A. 1984, B. 1988, C. 1986, or D. 1985? I know the answer. I say it is D. 1985. What Ben Kumar was so shocked that he forgot to ask if I was absolutely sure of my answer. There was the sound of the drums. The correct answer lifted up on the screen. Absolutely correct, said Ben Kumar. You have won 10,000 rupees. Okay, so we had a flashback to the quiz show. Now, remember when Ram said, when Smita asked him, well, how did you know the answers to all these questions? He said, I was lucky. I was lucky. He wasn't lucky because he guessed the answers. He was lucky because of the questions that were asked. So it's coincidence. You know that word, coincidence? Coincidence. Coincidence. You know, the first question that he was asked is, what do the initials INRI mean? And he knew because of his first father, who was the Christian priest, told him what those initials meant. And then the second question was about the song of the Sudras. And it just so happens that that was one of the songs that he was taught by the music teacher.
And then, every time a question gets asked, he just happens to have had an experience in his life to where he knew that question. So the coincidence is when two things happen that it's very unusual that each of those things would happen at the same time. So it was a coincidence that the very thing that he knew was the very question that was asked. That's coincidence. The word means two things that are unlikely to happen at the same time actually happen at the same time. So one time, a long time ago, I had a very good friend when I was a small boy. Very, very good friend when I was a small boy. And then he moved away. And I had forgotten all about him. So about 30 years later, I'm traveling in Europe. And I'm at a store. And I see the very same person. Now, what are the chances that someone that I knew from 30 years ago in a different country, on a different continent, I might meet up with again, in Europe? It was a coincidence. It was a coincidence that he was in the same store at the same time I was, and I hadn't seen him for 30 years. Two things, in this case, two people meeting who it was very unlikely that we would ever see each other again. But it was a coincidence. Two things happening that you wouldn't expect to happen. So the fact that the very questions that he was asked were life experiences or knowledge that he had. That's why he said, I was lucky. It was, it was a coincidence. So we're out of time. We'll have to continue tomorrow. Yeah. Jürgen Mai. Jürgen Mai Klopp. And tomorrow we're going to have another short lesson on when to use which words and that kind of thing. We're going to practice the order of sentences some more too. Okay? We're going to do that some more, and then we'll continue reading Slumdog some more. Okay?
If I say someone come in, come on. Someone come in, he or she, because I don't know he or.
Well, let me see what you have here. Someone
come in. I don't know. I just hear this. Someone come in. How can I say he or she?
Well, it would be she or he, because
I don't know who.
Oh, yeah, you don't know who it is? And then you want to add another sentence?
Yes.
And you don't know whether it's a man or a woman? Well, you would...
See you tomorrow, sir.
Goodbye. You see, if someone came to my house, you would